Getting outside to boost mood and energy is the topic. I'm going to talk about the stuff that's kind of obvious, and then I'm also going to talk about the stuff that you may not know about and would be relevant to the conversation around vitality. So the obvious stuff, right? Vitamin D, it's kind of the thing, right? You get outside, get your vitamin D. That's what everyone says. A correlation between low vitamin D levels and increased risk of depression, issues with immunity, issues around lethargy, energy issues in general. So sunlight exposure very specifically stimulates vitamin D production in skin. It's really good for mood. So getting out in the sun is just the way to go, right? So vitamin D is obviously the big one. The other one that you probably have heard me talk about to a certain extent is circadian rhythm regulation, right? Natural light, especially in the morning, regulates the circadian rhythm and says, okay, it's time to make hay, go get food, go live your day and forage, hunt, whatever you do. And in doing so, this is what I talked about last week, right? Is your best night's sleep starts, the morning before, is by setting your circadian rhythm by waking early and getting exposure to natural light, you improve your sleep quality that evening. Okay. So we used to use this back in the day, way before they got cool, we used a company called Lightbook, but circadian rhythm therapies for seasonal affective disorder, right? So if someone's really blue and they live in a, gray part of the world, you give them like a big shiny blue light in the mornings, that's full spectrum, and you're like, wake up, wake up, wake up, right? And you set the rhythm to say, this person is awake now, please, right? So the parts of getting outside that have really good literature behind them that I think are less spoken about, but I think are just as relevant, is serotonin release. Sunlight is basically thought to release serotonin levels and mood. So higher serotonin, more calm, more focused, more juju through the prefrontal cortex to translate into self-efficacy, self-development, all these wonderful things that you would want to wake up and enlighten yourself with. Sunlight triggers serotonin release in the brain. It's a good thing, I promise. And then, for those of you in the deep sleep solution, for those of you doing that work, serotonin then converts to melatonin in the evening. And for those of you doing the spiritual work, melatonin converts to dimethyltryptamine in serious out-of-body experiences and religious experiences. It's all the same axis, but it's based on tryptophan, 5-HTP, serotonin, melatonin, dimethyltryptamine. All one road, right? Sunlight, turns out we need it for that pathway. And you live in an ecosystem where they're very quick to chuck drugs at you for serotonin, right? The SSRIs, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, one of the most popular, if not the most popular class of drugs being given to people for mood, because people don't have enough serotonin. Two reasons for that, multiple reasons for that, but two big reasons for that. One is genetically modified foods don't pull tryptophan up from their roots. So genetically modified fruits and vegetables are devoid of tryptophan to a large extent, which means you're not getting the root base element, which means you're not making serotonin. And number two is if you're getting enough and you're hopefully have enough raw substrate, you're not out in the sun enough to crank on the stuff and get it released in your brain. Either way, you're blue. Either way, you're not in a good mood, right? And so that duo of eating genetically modified food and not getting sun takes the serotonin. So obviously, getting outside gets you moving more, right? So once you're outside, the sofa isn't there. So your endorphins go up, which is natural mood elevation juju, right? And so you are moving around, you're walking, whatever it is that you're doing, the physical activity correlated with being outside has significant impact on mood through the endorphin pathway. And then the parts that are less published but incredibly relevant is time in nature, time outside has multiple studies showing that it lowers cortisol. Okay. Lower cortisol, lower stress, lower anxiety, better mood, pure and simple. And that's not necessarily associated with sunshine. Like sunshine has all this other stuff that it does that's, wonderful. But these studies in particular are just people that go outside, lower cortisol, higher serotonin totally where we want to be, right? The other thing that sunlight in particular, but time in nature, there's studies on both time in the sun, time out in nature, which tends to kind of cross correlate with that, is brain-derived neurotropic factor. It's a protein that supports brain health, cognitive function. It increases with sunshine. So if you're getting outside, you're elevating your BDNF, which is letting your brain feel comfortable doing its job. You're elevating your serotonin so far. You're reducing your cortisol and you're bringing up your endorphins. That is free brain chemistry, right? That is, nobody's going to the pharmacy for that crap, right? That is using the internal pharmacy to feel better. And the vitamin D, either you're taking it in some sort of oral form or you're producing it, which is a much healthier way of making it anyways. So again, double down, triple down. Next one, negative ion exposure. Now that isn't necessarily just outside in the sun, but that's moving water, the beach, rainfall right after like rainfall or like a thunderstorm, waterfalls, if you're lucky enough to be around one. Those negative ions tend to have, and this is, now we're getting into the realm of chi. People don't, like the guys studying this don't know what the hell they're looking at, but they can tell you that negative ions have a positive effect on mood and cognitive performance. If you ask them why, they go, I don't know. And we could talk about the chi, the prana, the released charge in the air. We could talk about proton transfer and all that. But the folks doing those studies in particular are not necessarily looking at that. So I just want to be clear that the causation is there, right? But just because you don't understand why doesn't mean you shouldn't go outside. It seems like the obvious move. And then one of the things that I talk about a lot, and I increasingly find myself talking about on a weekly basis, is the restoration of your attention. When you are in a natural environment, attention improves and your cognitive function tends to come back. Why? We've talked about this in a few different contexts, but I want to double down on an example I used probably a few weeks ago. Is if I'm an animal out in a prairie and I am chilling, my peripheral vision opens up and I'm kind of sitting in a place where, behind me should be safe, right? Or I have a friend behind me looking that way. And I just kind of open up my peripheral vision and I'm scanning for distant threats while I'm digesting the grass that I ate, right? Rest and digest. The eyes come out. The vista gets big. I become observant through my periphery of a bigger world. When I see a lion, whoa, there he is. There he is. Whoa, nope, he's not. Yeah, he is coming this way, right? That is unfortunately very similar to the same physics of looking at this stupid thing all day. The idea that you go outside to restore your attention, part of it is, all the other things, all the different juices that start flowing. But then part of it also is, again, broader vista and tuning your nervous system to say it's safe. It's safe. And obviously be somewhere safe, right? A fountain would work, right? We have a fountain in our house here and, just water moving. If you ever look at, I must have recommended this in the years. There's a guy named Victor Schauberger, who was an Austrian forester. And when Hitler came in, he was like, get me Schauberger, right? Because his work was just so profound. And he was talking about the swirling dynamics of energy and protons jumping phases in moving bodies of water like rivers, and talking about how you energize while being around flowing water and all that. But in a very real sense, you guys have all touched his technology because his theories around the swirling of water and the capacitation of protons became the prototype for the jet engine. And so that's the way fuel goes through a jet engine and spins and creates the propulsion. So it all came around moving water. So any moving water, if you could, by hook or by crook, it will generate the negative ion exposure, which is what you want. On that attention point, one more thing is, who here is almost done with this? I'll send an invite for this on Friday. I think this book's great, right? I've been practicing some of the meditations in the back, and I've done all these for years, but it's just good. It's a good recall for some of this stuff. And there's some of the stuff that he brought up that I had no idea about. So it's great. Really well worth the read. There's a couple parts that are really about like face structure and all that, where people are like, what is this? It's more interesting to my wife than me because she's a dentist. But so far, I think well worth anyone's read. And he talked about a section with pranayama, right? Where you can manipulate breath directing it to come from one nostril or another. So switching hemispheres. So if I'm breathing predominantly from my left nostril, I'm helping stimulate my parasympathetic and right nostril sympathetic. And for someone who has or sympathetic dominance, you start doing more left nostril breathing, like 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, and just playing with it to see if you can trigger the body to go elicit a relaxation response and be like, it's safe. It's safe, baby, right? So there's some techniques that we'll work on. We'll talk about that on the call for that later, I think Friday. I gotta send an invite for that. But the other way I used to do it with students and patients would be, where's the closest viewpoint to your house? Oh, so-and-so hill. Great. Drive up there and look peripherally as wide as you can. And so students of the people who've been to my retreats, like I can't do this in this frame, right? But you put your hands all the way out for the Shen set and you're looking at your hands in the peripheral vision and you move it as close as you need to until you see it. And then you start working on bringing it further back and stretching your peripheral vision to enhance your Shen, or your spirit. What is that? That is allowing your nervous system to say, okay, we're safe. We're safe. And what happens when we're safe? We heal, we sleep, we make love, we digest. Good things happen when we feel safe, right? And so that is another neurological lever to turn the dial towards letting the baby feel safe, right? And turns out going outside does that. Turns out that works. And a throwback to last week, I kind of alluded to this, but important to understand that by going outside, you are really resetting your circadian rhythm. Like right now, I'm sitting in front of this desk and I got this super bright light over there. Actually, when I look at it, I see a ring, right? Like that's not natural light. Out there is. So the more time I spend out there, the more my body goes, oh, okay, it's noon o'clock for you. Now it's evening o'clock for you. And so it starts to tune your circadian rhythm to regulate your wake-sleep cycles as they would naturally rise and fall. But if you're under artificial lights more often than not, your body's getting tricked, right? So very simple, but important understanding there. Last thing I want to talk about, which is also an incredibly important point for anyone on this call to take note of, is that time spent in nature has been associated in multiple studies with reduced inflammatory markers in the body. Chronic inflammation, root of all disease, linked to fatigue, linked to mood disorders, linked to you not playing tennis anymore, right? All the inflammatory markers. And look, we talked about this in the past, the NF-kappa B pathway, the switch coming from mind-body practices and all things that you can do to push your nervous system back into feeling safe. And in doing so, the inflammation comes down. But going out into nature very directly correlates with that. Now, if you're in the Amazon jungle and you hear a black panther and you're looking over your shoulders the whole time, scratch that, right? You have to feel safe, right? But what I'm talking about is going into some beautiful natural setting where it is safe because the human dominance has made it so for you, right? And you can relax into a natural state of your natural state in a natural environment. And then there's the transference of chi, right? All of the life forms around you in nature are emitting a signature of life, whether it's calcium channels, whether it's nerves, whether it's just the subtle flow of electrons through minerals in the rocks. There is a conductance of energy everywhere in nature. None of this is disputed, right? Our access to that energy is not understood, but there is a conductance of energy within a natural environment. And then there's the greater magnetic fields of anything that has life, right? Which is energy. And then there's the bigger magnetic field of, say, the whole forest. Then there's the bigger magnetic field of the planet, right? Very well understood. We have these magnetic fields and fields within fields, and our ability to step into the natural toroidal fields of the natural world somehow magically restores our mood to our kind of normal state. As opposed to, like, you know, and I'm in a room right now, right? These computers don't do well out in the yard, right? So I'm sitting in a room right now, and every wall I'm looking at is flat. The floor is flat. Probably better that way, because if it was contoured in the house, someone would fall, right? But when you go out into that a natural environment, it's not that the walls are meeting the floor at 90-degree angles. That doesn't exist in nature, does it? We made that. So we've boxed in our consciousness by boxing ourselves into boxes. And so the three-dimensional contours of whether it's a prairie, a mountain, a beach, or whatever, are sending signals to your nervous system as your feet are touching down on them, doing this or subtly doing this, and then adjusting this way. And this is just my foot, right? From my foot up, then my knee has to adjust, then my hip has to adjust, then my spine has to adjust, all the way up to my neck, all the way through my entire nervous system is this signaling sequencing that is coming from kind of a feedback loop of your body having a sensory array at the bottoms of your feet, feeling the contours of the earth and sending information back up saying, now this is straight, now this is straight. And that goes to your vestibular system, that goes through your eyes, it goes through a really complicated array of computational things that are happening under the radar all the time. But there's a ton of stuff in the creeping and crawling neurological research on this, that if we deprive that stream of data from the human animal and everything gets flat and everything loses contours, the flow of information starts to decline. It's like, shit, he's in a hallway, right? I can go to bed now, right? So there's parts of your proprioceptive nervous system that just go, meh, she doesn't go anywhere. Right. And so as that starts to kind of atrophy and shut down, then the sensory motor strip of the brain doesn't get the information to process. The parts of the brain that are constantly in communication go, I don't know, everything's flat. I mean, it's flat still. Right. And so things start to kind of diminish in signal strength, and the brain isn't firing on all cylinders. And you think you need another coffee. You think you are in a bad mood and you can't recall why. So all of this kind of like dead animal lack of signaling might be coming from you not stimulating your nervous system in the appropriate way to say, I'm alive and I am moving through 3D. So one of the things that I do with patients who are really kind of far gone in this world is I would get them to start bouldering. Go find a creek and just do some sort of terrain that requires you to use all fours, crawling, crossing, grabbing, climbing, nothing crazy for people who don't know how to do this stuff. Go back to being a four-wheel drive animal. And what ends up happening is the brain starts going and just firing back up. And all of a sudden, it's like magic. They're like, oh my God, I got the best night's sleep of my life. Oh my God, I'm in such a good mood. Oh my God, my sex drive is back. Why? Because the animal is waking up, right? So there's a lot there, right? We covered a lot of pretty important reasons to get outside. And there's really, a couple things that would keep you from going outside. One is you're going to get skin cancer, right? Put on some sunblock. So people are so scared about skin cancer that they threw the baby out with the bathwater, right? And so look, especially if you're fair skinned, especially if, you have a tendency to have that in your family, don't do anything dumb, put on sunblock, non-toxic sunblock, and get outside, right? Obviously, if you're in a bad neighborhood and you're going to get mugged, don't do it there, right? If you're, in a neighborhood where you shouldn't be out at night, don't do it. Go somewhere safe and do it. The whole point is I just want to double down on this. Sorry if this sounds trite, but I just want to make sure I get this point across. The whole point is to keep drawing cards into the stack that says rest and digest. You're safe. Peace, right? Serotonin. Because we live in the stack that's like dopamine. There's not enough time. The world is flat. The world is dangerous, right? And so once you start feeding the wolf that is on the right side of that math, you'll start to see your life shift in that direction. For some people, it takes 2 years. For some people, it's like miraculous, gong going off, like, holy crap, everything changed. I don't make any promises in terms of time, but I can tell you the science is very clear. Get outside. Thank you.